analysis now with William Lawrence in Washington, D.C. He's a professor of political science and international affairs at American University and is also a former US diplomat. Good to have you back with us, Professor. We heard there from our correspondent in Washington that Donald Trump has made some remarks in the wake of Israel's strikes on Iran. He said that he had prior knowledge to Israel's attack, and he also said that the US military would not be drawn. But in the same breath, he also said that the US would defend Israel as well. What do you make of that response? Do you see that US intervention, or at least US support, is inevitable?
Support in defense, yes, as your reporter said. Support in offense, not really. I mean, the U.S. kind of wants its to have its cake and eat its too, in the sense that it wants to have the negotiation with Iran while Israel hits Iran in a way that the Trump administration believes will help the talks. The U.S., if they did not greenlight the attack, they certainly said now is the time, and in April they stopped the same attack. I'm sure they're discussing with the Israelis what not to hit, even if they're not telling the Israelis what to hit. And the defense of Israel, I'm sure, is in full gear right now as all the U.S. satellites are turned on and they're watching what's going on in Iran, but also getting ready for the onslaught. Where the Iranians are able to fire off 30 missiles, every 5 minutes, and it takes 13 minutes for the missiles to get to Israel, and so the defense of Israel will be quite dramatic. What the U.S. is saying to Iran is, we won't hit you directly unless you hit us in Iraq, primarily the 2,500 troops there at several bases there. And yet, if Iran does that, and if there's injuries and significant damage that triggers the U.S., then the U.S. can get involved in this multi-day assault on Tehran. So the U.S. is sort of leaving all of its options open, hoping that its words will limit the damage and limit the escalation.
And Professor, in Trump's latest remarks, he also said that Iran could not have a nuclear bomb, and that he hoped that Israel's attack would bring Iran back to the negotiating table. We know Washington and Tehran had been meeting to discuss a potential new nuclear deal. This process was one that Israel was vehemently against. Is Donald Trump being quite hopeful that perhaps this Israeli attack would force Iran back to the negotiating table?
Absolutely. I mean, as you all know, Trump's unpredictability actually helps him in negotiations sometimes, and Iran will be very wary of going too far and then making the level of American retribution against any attacks something that it just can't tolerate, because Trump will go zig and zag, towards heavy attacks or resisting attacks. We were about to enter into the 6th round of negotiations towards a deal between the U.S. and Iran that, ironically would have been a resuscitation of the JCPOA that Trump abrogated, that ended during his term in office. And now they're saying that the new deal will be much more ambitious than the other one. All the while we hear U.S. analysts and Israeli analysts saying Iran is just weeks away from, something between 9 and 15 nuclear bombs, or they might be a year away. And so a lot of this is gamesmanship, brinksmanship, zigging and zagging to try to keep the other side off balance a bit. And Iran has shown over the last a year and a half or so, with the bombings of Iran and the retributive bombings of Israel, that it will calibrate at times. Sometimes it'll do something that's sort of big but not too big. It will avoid killing people on the ground, even though the Israelis have killed civilians, women, and at least one child in its attacks on residential neighborhoods. And so a lot of careful calibrating going on, and heated discussions, surely, in Tehran, in Israel and in Washington about how much is enough and for what period do we escalate this before we then try to de-escalate it. This is the largest attack on Iran since 1987, the siege of Basra, or 1988, the War of the Cities, but about 38 years ago. And that was a very bloody conflict between Iran and Iraq that we had a hard time ending. But it's a very different type of circumstance now in which any move can provoke too much of a move from the other side. And then again, that's why I'm saying there's a lot of brinksmanship and gamesmanship going on here.
Well, that's right, because in the previous bouts of fighting between Iran and Israel, we saw quite measured attacks from either side, nothing too inflammatory and nothing to cause or spark concern of an all-out war between the two sides. But as you quite rightly pointed out, what we're now seeing is something perhaps more severe. Tehran, as you pointed out, hasn't come under direct attack since the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. And now with the latest Israeli strikes, we're seeing residential blocks in the very heart of Tehran being targeted. Are you worried that with this escalation, does this bring us a step closer to an all-out war between Iran and Israel?
I really appreciate that question and the chance to answer it, because what is an all-out war with no troops on the ground? You talk to the military experts and they say you can inflict all kind of damage aerially on another country without really winning or even approaching winning the war. You can't even defeat the nuclear program in Iran because so much of it is buried so deep underground and dispersed in ways that even attacking 4 different parts of Iran with lots of intelligence and even saboteurs on the ground. And I don't know how much you've been reporting that it's at the same time as this bombing, there's several sabotage operations going on in Iran around the nuclear program. What does all-out war actually mean? The Israelis, for all of their strength, couldn't even control Gaza, over the last year and a half. They're not going to invade Iran. So there's no army that's about to enter Iran and do an all-out war. Instead, you have a simulacrum of all-out war where you puff up and you hit and don't accomplish that much and then claim victory to your audience back home. And both sides can engage in various levels of this, but never really reaching all-out war because neither side has much of the ability to inflict that much pain on the other side that resembles all-out war the way we're seeing, for example, between Russia and Ukraine or Israel and Gaza, etc.
At the same time, the Israeli military has announced that it's laying a complete siege of the occupied West Bank. It's saying that it's locking down cities across the West Bank until further notice. In your view, is there a connection between what we're seeing in Iran and the occupied West Bank?
1,000%. And the war we sometimes call the seven-front war will become even more of a seven-front war in the coming hours and days and perhaps weeks as everything escalates again. Houthis have made threats. Others are talking about their next options. And it's really unfortunate because we've been on the brink of deals, here and there at several times. And then Israel, in some sense, its own worst enemy, then provokes over here, which provokes a response over there, and we're back to the seven fronts again. And this perpetual war, rather than an all-out war, is really the feature of our times, as the most right-wing government in Israeli history and a prime minister that is fearful of stepping down because he'd face, legal actions and perhaps even prison time, wants this war to go on and on and on.
It's hard to gauge at this point what ordinary Israelis are feeling. You mentioned this concept of a seven-front war, and indeed, since Israel launched its war on Gaza on October 7, 2023, it's opened up a number of fronts with countries in the region, including Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and now Iran. What is the end game? You mentioned the concept of a perpetual war, but is there an ultimate aim given the makeup of this extreme right coalition that's currently in power in Israel?
No, it's just to inflict the maximum amount of pain until they're told to stop. And they'll probably be told to stop by the Americans. And that's true on all 7 fronts. And of course, we had a deal in Lebanon not fully implemented. We have negotiations in Syria. We have the various groups in Iraq and Jordan, and all around where the war intensifies and then the war stops. But the stopping of the war is just until the next time. I think we've moved beyond the old concept of mowing the lawn, which is just you talk about where they sort of, strike in a short period as much as they can until they're told to stop. But now we're talking about things that could go on, year after year after year, where it sort of stops for a while and starts again on any of these 7 fronts. And then again, inflicting pain and then sort of declaring that you're more safe in a self-satisfactory way, when in fact you probably, if you're making yourself more safe for the next few days or the next few months, you're definitely provoking further attacks in the following years because of all the retributive violence that'll be coming back your way. It's only a matter of time. Violence begets violence. It's a concept as old as human civilization, and it's only when you realize that there are better ways to find security and stability that you can turn the page. And all countries need to learn that, including the United States.
Okay, Professor William Lawrence, we'll leave it there, but thanks as always for sharing your thoughts with us.